Hello, everyone, and thanks for coming out for this first lecture regarding international organizations and law. This is very, very important since, well, it's the first lecture, and I'm excited to have all of you. It's a big class, as most of my classes are. The first thing I want to jump right into is this whole disenchanted, enchanted approach. I really like this part of the book. It's at the end of the beginning of at the end of the first chapter, but it's very important as I actually did contract work for the United Nations and other international governmental and non-governmental organizations. And one of the important parts of this is we get a little too disenchanted with these organizations because they fail. And when they fail, they often fail big, like Rwanda with the United Nations failing to stop the genocide. But we sometimes give these international organizations expectations well beyond of what they deserve. And if we see the little things they do on the ground, which are very, very important, we can sometimes understand that they do actually work. And I think this is why I like this whole enchanted approach versus disenchanted, because you can't be, completely mesmerized by these international institutions because they're going to fail, right? But they often do work, particularly in smaller developing countries. So yeah, when you get into countries like the United States, a lot of times they will not follow the law, Great Britain, Russia, etc. But these smaller countries, like if you take important case, we'll be looking at Bolivia, Peru, and Chile. Bolivia's been looking to get access to the sea since after it lost it in a series of wars in South America. They actually do heed the call of these international organizations much more than bigger countries. And this is going to be very, very important. So if we don't put them on such a pedestal or such a high horse, we'll see that they do open up space for important things. You see behind me, like I mentioned before, this is UNASUR, where I did some research in Ecuador. People had high hopes for it. It's a regional organization. You'll be reading an article I have under review on the regional organization, but at the same time, it didn't. They actually closed it, but it actually did work on a lot of levels. And if we understand that, we can understand how these international organizations can open up space for different conflict resolution strategies, and also do a little things on the ground. Like when I worked for the United Nations, they did help a lot of women and other groups and filled those gaps that the states, poorer states, like it was Nicaragua, where I lived 8 years of my life. I lived in Latin America, and I still do research there. But they do address a lot of problems. I look at the United Nations with FARC in the peace process in Colombia. The United Nations helped collect those weapons. Without the United Nations, there would be no one else to do that. But then you see the big failures like Iraq, obviously, the Security Council. You look at Rwanda, and now you even look at, we're going to have a great debate about this, although very lamentable, about Myanmar. Myanmar, obviously because of the genocide, but also more recently because of its return to the dictatorship, should states get involved in Myanmar? And this is going to be very, very important. And this is one of the last weeks we're going to be doing it, but it's very interesting is when is the use of force justifiable in the international system? But when we get into that, the disenchanted and enchanted, then you get into what's important in the book stresses, which is why I like this first chapter. It encompasses important subjects at the very beginning of this overall course is the idea of compliance. When do states comply, right? So that goes obviously hand in hand with enforcement. Do international organizations have the ability to force states to comply to their ruling? And the answer is often no. But still, some of these smaller states actually listen to these cases and do comply. One is the case where Argentina brought Ghana, that was holding its warship due to the money Argentina owed international vulture fund, I call them vulture, buitres, and it beat Ghana in the law of the sea, and Ghana let go of its ship. We're going to read a little about this case, and it's very important. It goes sometimes unsung because we hear more about how we don't follow international institutions, and they do fail, and they do. Nicaragua took the United States to court in the 1980s. People forget because we were illegally, I say we, I'm saying because I'm from the United States, just caused an illegal war and suffering against a very small country, Nicaragua, and they took us to court, the International Court of Justice, and the United States lost and said, we're not even going to listen to this. So in a lot of cases, there is no enforcement, but it does help us write history. So Nicaragua will always have that on its side in history, and this is very important to counter the more hegemonic powers who try to write history. The idea of compliance is very important with enforcement, but then you have sovereignty, the idea of sovereignty. Should states even listen to the World Trade Organization? Or when you look at it, when we do it in the third week of the class, I believe, the European Union, one of the world's biggest organizations, regional organizations, that is like a mini state, or some might like to act like it wanted to supplant the individual states of Europe to have a greater European state. But look at the sovereignty that built up and the backlashes that come with this. This is very interesting, right? Because we have had the European Union, the political, the monetary union, a lot of countries are in, not all, remember, but then you have the backlash against the European Union, and you have Brexit, and then they were scared about an italics or whatever you call for it to Italy, a Grexit for the Greeks, and so on. So, sovereignty will play an important role in this course, because a lot of people will be like, no, we shouldn't have to listen to these organizations. And one big one might as well just, the elephant in the room, WHO, right? The World Health Organization, with the COVID crisis, we're in the pandemic. Should we listen to the WHO? And that's a big a debate we're going to have, and that's the World Health Organization and its ability to deal with these pandemics. And has it lost credibility? And does this mean more, because we have the tendency to generalize in our head, like if the WHO doesn't have credibility, does the United Nations, etc. And want to see, does, the WHO will have a debate, have this kind of credibility? Or should we say, no, we're a sovereign nation, we shouldn't listen to organizations like the WHO? So all of these subjects are going to come up, and they come up, I think, in this book, the first chapter, very well, and the author lays it out extremely well, better than I can explain it, that's for sure. So I hope you really enjoy it, and if you have any questions or comments, please leave it in the community forum. Many of you have had me before, you know how I roll and everything, and a lot of students can actually benefit from your questions and comments, and I really, really do enjoy them. And like I said before, here I am in Quito. No, I wish I was, because it's going to get hot here in Arizona, and Quito has beautiful weather. And that behind me is UNASUR, where I did research, the Union of South American States, that doesn't exist anymore. So you see this idea of enchantment, disenchantment. It's like, well, it doesn't really work anymore, we're going to take it down. But it actually did. It opened up space for a wide range of international conflict resolution strategies and opportunities that the region otherwise would not have. We're going to deal with other regional organizations from, deal with ASEAN nations, the Arab League, etc. And is this good or bad? The bombing of Yemen, is that against international law? We're going to get to a lot of these different things. But remember, for the beginning, think about it, disenchanted versus enchanted. Compliance, enforcement, sovereignty, all these things are extremely, extremely important for the very first week of the class that we have to deal with, to see if states listen to the international organizations. When I worked for the United Nations abroad in Nicaragua, I saw a lot of the good they did, but I also understand there's a lot of weaknesses. One big one is, are these institutions, as I brought up in the review lecture, I hope you already watched, for the elites. I worked for KPMG International for a while, doing contract work, and that was when Nicaragua, where I lived 8 years, was going through a rage, just a broad spectrum of privatizations, and it seemed like the people weren't really benefiting, and it was for the elite. And I saw this with the World Bank, the IMF. A lot of their policies are not very helpful to the smallest people out there. When I say small, I don't mean like small, but we're talking about people who don't have the power. And this is something we're going to have to think about. Do these organizations reflect the interests of the people, or are certainly behind them? Now, that doesn't mean to say that, oh, you're a populist or something like that. I don't even like that word because I don't even know what it means. You know what I mean? You could be right wing, left wing. Oh, I'm a populist. Well, everyone's the people. So I never really got that. But anyways, we'll talk about that later as well. But the question is, do these institutions reflect the interests of the people? And this is where you get the backlash of sovereignty. We saw this is Ecuador. I've seen some of the protests against the IMF and World Bank. You'll be watching videos when I saw protests of Nicaragua against the IMF and World Bank, from doctors to teachers, students, etc. So they really take on these institutions because they don't feel like they're reflecting their values. So there's a lot to talk about here, and I'm really excited for this class, and I hope you really, really enjoy it.